Change to light up your life. A dark room, only dimly lit by a small window. A middle-aged man named Jack was struggling to fix an old light bulb. His face was sweaty. His hands were shaking from trying to fix it over and over again. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, things just don't go your way? Like Jack, trying to fix an old light bulb, but the light just won't come back. Jack sighed, looking at the light bulb that still wouldn't turn on. He thought, "I've tried everything. Why isn't it working?" Jack stood up and looked around the dusty room. An old bookshelf, a few family photos, and a faded wooden table. The darkness made Jack feel even sadder. He remembered the days when everything was bright and full of life. Jack picked up the light bulb again, trying to see what was wrong. He muttered, "Maybe I just need a little more patience. I can fix this." At that moment, the door opened, and an old neighbor named Henry walked in. He was carrying a small bag of tools and smiling. "Jack, what's going on? I've seen you fiddling around all morning." Jack pointed to the light bulb and said, "I've tried everything to fix it, but it still won't light up. I don't want to replace it because this bulb was my mom's." Mr. Henry sat down next to Jack, looked at the light bulb and said, "Jack, sometimes the problem isn't how you're fixing it, but what you're trying to hold on to has lost its value." Mr. Henry opened his tool bag, took out a new light bulb and placed it in front of Jack. "Try this one." Jack shook his head. "But this old bulb means a lot to me. It's the last memory of my mother." Henry smiled and said softly, "The light isn't in the old bulb, Jack. It's in how you continue to honor your mom's memory. Sometimes to move forward, we need to change and renew things." Jack was silent, looking at the old light bulb in his hand, then at the new one. He reluctantly took the new bulb and replaced it. The room lit up as the new light bulb was installed. The light spread everywhere, making the room feel warmer and more alive. Jack looked around, surprised to see how different everything in the room looked under the new light. "See, the light hasn't disappeared. It just needed a new way to shine." Jack sat down, looking at the bright room. He picked up the old light bulb, smiled and placed it on the bookshelf where he kept important mementos. Jack said, "You're right, Henry. I've held on to the past too long, forgetting that the best way to honor it is to keep living fully." Do you feel like Jack too? Share this story and let's light up our lives together. The Kite in the Wind, Turning Challenges into Strength. A boy named Tom stood on a green meadow, holding a small, colorful kite in his hands. The wind began to blow strongly, causing the kite to fly around in a chaotic manner. Do you think the strong wind is the kite's enemy, or the very thing that helps it soar? Tom carefully tied the rope around his wrist, his eyes filled with determination. "Today, I'm going to make this kite fly as high as it can." The wind grew stronger and stronger, and the kite was flying out of control. Tom frowned, trying to hold the kite string tight. Suddenly, an old man passed by. He stopped, looked at Tom, and asked, "Why don't you let go of the string when the wind is this strong? It might stabilize the kite." Tom gasped, still holding on to the rope. "No, if I let go, the kite will fall. It's the strong wind that's helping it fly higher." The man quietly watched the kite, then smiled slightly. "You know, in life, strong winds are like challenges, but if we face them, they become our driving force." Tom looked at him curiously but did not answer, concentrating on adjusting the string to make the kite more stable. "Look, it's flying higher than ever." The man smiled and said, "You've just learned an important lesson. Don't fear strong winds. Learn to use them, because they're your chance to fly higher." Tom smiled, but his eyes were thoughtful. He realized that, like the kite, his life needed challenges to grow. It was getting dark. Tom untied the kite string and folded it carefully. He turned to the man and said, "Thank you for helping me understand. From now on, I won't be afraid to face challenges." The man nodded, patting Tom on the shoulder before leaving. The strong wind isn't your enemy. Share this story and let's turn challenges into strength. Building success from small details. A construction site was nearing completion. A worker named David was checking the last bricks. A small brick fell to the ground, but he ignored it, thinking it was not important. Have you ever thought a single brick could change an entire building? David looked at the nearly completed building and smiled. It's just one brick missing. It should be fine. A year later, David returned to inspect the building. He was surprised to see a large crack in the wall. The floor was showing signs of sinking. David bent down to check and realized that the crack started at the exact spot where the brick he had missed was. He was frustrated and blamed himself. I thought one missing brick wouldn't matter, but now the whole building is at risk. David called an architect to check it out. He explained, every brick, no matter how small, plays a role in keeping the structure stable. If one is missing, the pressure shifts, causing damage. David decided to repair the building. He carefully replaced the missed brick, pouring more cement to reinforce it. The scene of him working under the sun, with sweat dripping down his forehead. After many days of repair, the building was stable again. David looked up and smiled, feeling relieved. He thought to himself, even a small brick can affect the entire structure. Life is the same. Every little detail matters. David stood in front of the completed building, proud of his work. He turned to a young apprentice and said, remember, never overlook the small things. They can make a big difference. Life is like building a house. Pay attention to the little things. They can determine your success. Makrar, why pausing is the key to moving forward. A quiet room, dim light shining through the window. On the wall, an old clock had stopped ticking. Its owner, Mr. George, looked up at the clock with a sad expression. Have you ever felt like your life is like a stopped clock, where everything seems stuck? George took down the watch and thought to himself, this clock has been in my family for over 50 years, but now it's no longer working. George took the watch to an old watchmaker, Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul's shop was small but filled with old clocks ticking steadily. Paul looked at the clock, smiled slightly and said, this clock isn't broken. It's just dusty and needs a good cleaning to work again. Paul carefully disassembled the watch, revealing each small part under the light. He used a soft brush to clean the gears, removing the old layer of dust. George watched each operation and asked, can cleaning really make it work again? Paul nodded. Of course. Sometimes we don't need big repairs. We just need to pause, refresh, and everything will be fine. After a few hours, Paul reassembled the watch. He wound the mainspring, and the ticking sound came, regular and strong. George happily held the watch in his hand, saying, I can't believe it. Just cleaning made it work like new. Paul put his hand on George's shoulder and said, clocks are like people. When we feel stuck, that's when we need to pause, clear our minds, and restart. George fell silent, looking at the ticking clock, and began to think about his life. He realized that he had been so absorbed in his work that he had forgotten to take care of himself. George hung the clock on the wall. Its regular ticking sound echoed throughout the room. He smiled and said to his son, remember, when everything feels stuck, what we need isn't to force ourselves forward, but to pause and restart. George's son looked at his watch and nodded, remembering his father's words. Sometimes life needs a moment to pause. Share this story if it resonates with you. The Little Flame, lighting up the world. A small village was plunged into darkness due to a power outage. A boy named Sam stood in the middle of the dark room, holding a small candle in his hand. What can a small flame do in the midst of complete darkness? This story might surprise you. Sam lit the candle and looked at the faint light on his face. He whispered, just one candle, but maybe it's enough to start. Sam took the small candle and went out of the house. He saw his neighbors sitting in the yard, looking worried because of the darkness. Sam went over and gave them the candle. One of the neighbors asked, will this candle be enough to light up, Sam? It's too small to make a difference. Sam smiled and said, it might be small, but if everyone lights up, the entire village will shine bright. The neighbor used the flame from Sam's candle to light his candle. Each candle continued to be passed on, and the light began to spread everywhere. A group of people gathered in the village's central square. They held candles in their hands, the flickering light illuminating everyone's faces. An older man approached Sam and said, "You're amazing. From just one small candle, you've brought light to all of us." Sam replied with a bright smile. "A small candle isn't enough to light up everything, but it can start. What's important is that we share its light." The whole village was lit up by candlelight. People were laughing and thanking Sam. The boy stood in the middle of the crowd, proud but humble. Sam looked up at the dark sky, then turned to the people and said, "A small flame may not do much, but it can inspire a change that makes all the difference. Be the small flame, because from you, the whole world can shine brighter." If you like this story, share it. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel to watch the next interesting videos.